Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Based on the reception of my latest video, it seems there are a number of you that wanted me to go over how team building, the roster philosophy, might work at an NFL level, and this is my favorite part of the game, so I'm going to do my very best to be as in-depth as I can. So let's just crack right into it. The NFL is structured on a hard cap, which means every team in the league has a strict set of financial limitations that they all have to abide by in order to build the best team possible, unlike certain sports like baseball, for instance, where you can just keep spending money and there's not really any restrictions on that. I know the NBA recently has implemented the second apron and are sort of working towards maybe one day having a hard cap, but in the NFL, you are limited to $255 million. In 2024, of course, this goes up by about 5 to 8% every year. Which does help with roster flexibility. Of course, if the cap is always increasing, you can plan for it and make those decisions that way. So you have a strict $255 million limit on the players that you can afford. I say strict, but there is some flexibility that you can use where if you don't spend all $255 million, in a given year, you can roll over some of that cap space into the next season as a way of saving money. However, there is also a cap floor. So you have to spend 89% of your cap space every year. So in this instance, in 2024, you would have to spend $226 million of your cap. Otherwise, you will be penalized over the course of 4 years. So it's not a year-to-year thing, but you have to spend 89% of your cap space. Otherwise, you will be penalized. And most commonly, they would do that by making your players free agents. They can also dock draft picks if you're not spending your allocated cap space. But we have not seen that happen in a good long while, so obviously the plan is working. So you have to spend 89% of your cap over any 4-year period, but most teams just do it in a year-to-year basis. So that is the cap, right? We build our teams in accordance with the cap. Now, how do we acquire players? There are many different ways. Of course, you can trade for players, you can sign them in free agency. The main way that a lot of teams are going to be building rosters is, of course, going to be the draft. Me personally, I think a lot of online discussion can at times overvalue the draft, especially teams with organizations who haven't really proven themselves to be good developers. Because I always am under the belief that it's not a drafting issue that we see when teams are constantly drafting busts and their players aren't working out. And sometimes it is, right? Don't get me wrong. Sometimes you can just have a GM that doesn't know how to draft. But a lot of times I think it's a development issue. So the draft can be at times overvalued, in my opinion, but the draft is a very important step in building our rosters. So the draft has 7 rounds. So you get 7 rounds in the draft, and each team gets 1 pick per round by default, and you can use those picks to trade for players. You can use those picks to move up in the draft. You can use those picks in a variety of ways, of course, just picking players. And you can also be awarded compensation picks. Okay, so compensation picks work with free agency. Okay, so if you are a team and you lose a player, let's say, worth $13 million in free agency. So they leave your team, they go and they sign with another team for $13 million. And you don't bring that a player back that is worth $13 million. You would then be awarded a compensation pick, and I believe for this price range, because the compensation picks are based on the percentile of total contracts in the NFL. So you have to be in the top 33% of all contracts in the NFL. This would qualify, and 13 million, I think, is around the 40th percentile or something like that. So I think 13 million would be a sixth or a fifth round compensation pick. It could be as high as a fourth, but it's not going to be a third. And of course, a third is the highest you can get in a compensatory pick, but there are only 32 compensatory picks awarded every year, and each team can only have a maximum of 4 unless those picks are awarded by the Rooney Rule, which is if you have a minority head coach and they sign to be a head coach for the first time with another team, you will be given a third round compensatory pick for the next 2 seasons or maybe 3. I can't remember exactly if it's 2 or 3, but you get a third round pick in each of the following 2 seasons. And those are subject to their own rules. They don't qualify in the same formula. But otherwise, there are 32 compensatory picks that are awarded based on free agency contracts. So the number of players going out is, of course, the first qualifier there. If you lose more players than you take in, you will get a compensation pick. This is to allow rebuilding teams to have assets in order to rebuild. So obviously, again, more players going out, you'll get a compensation pick. More money going out, you'll get a compensation pick, is the easiest way to remember how that works. But yeah, more picks is always better. Picks have value, even if not specifically for picking players, but picks themselves, draft picks, they will always have value, no matter the sport. Maybe not so much in baseball, but that's an entirely different discussion. Now, with the financial restrictions out of the way, let's talk actual player philosophy. So each team is going to have their own structure, their own ideas of how to run an offense, how to build a team. So for this example, I've used my personal favorite. We're going to operate under the assumption that we're running a 4-3 base defense, which means 4 down linemen. If you remember the position-based video that I did about 9 months ago, that means your big D-line pressure guys. So we're running 4-3. In reality, we'd probably run more 5-2 nickel, because nickel is the new base. Everybody in the NFL is running nickel now. They're running 2 high safety. That's a whole other topic. I could go into the philosophies of coaching and play calling, but for now, this is about building a team. So we're running 4-3 base defense and a power zone run West Coast scheme. And that sounds like a lot of words that don't actually mean anything, but that's essentially saying we want to run a lot of play action, like a lot of play action, which is my favorite. I love play action. It's very effective. It is everywhere in the NFL nowadays. And we want to run power zone, which means we need big offensive linemen that are very strong, that can open up gaps in the running lanes for our running back to get through. That way, when we're calling play action, the opposing defense always has to worry about, okay, this is an actual running play and we're not just faking it. So power zone run West Coast and a 4-3 base, which will set us on our course to build our franchise. Now, we need to keep in mind that for our team, we have a set number of players that we can have signed at one time. And during the regular season, that is 53 players on the active roster. And the active roster essentially just means that teams can't poach these players from you. I mean, really, that's all it means, is you get 53 players that are yours no matter what. You can only have 48 of those 53 on your game day roster, which means that they can play in the game and they can be rotated in and out. They have to be on the game day roster, which is set the day before. You can have 16 players on your practice squad, and then there's also injured reserve and a couple of other different reserves that are more niche, that don't really matter, like the reserve retired list or the non-football injury reserve. But injured reserve is the one you'll see most often, because you are allowed to place an injured player on injured reserve, and that protects them from being poached by another team, but it will also allow you to have an open roster spot on your active roster. So there are two different types of injured reserve. There's the short-term IR and there's the season IR. So before the season begins, you are allowed to designate 2 players on short-term IR, unless, of course, you activate them to the 53-man roster before the season. But if you don't do that, you can designate 2 to return from IR. And if you don't, and they're still on IR, they're automatically out for the season. If they're injured during the season, they will automatically be put on short-term IR, which is 4 weeks. And then after those 4 weeks expire, you get a 21-day practice window to then elevate that player back to the active roster. Otherwise, they would be put on full-time season-ending injured reserve. So these are the limitations that we face if we are, in fact, the general manager. Now, let's talk about building a team. So I am going to open a new page here, and let's talk about what I look for specifically if we're building a roster. So let's remember we're building a 4-3 base defense, and we're running power zone run out of a West Coast style offense, which just means a lot of play action. So what are some of the traits we might be looking for in players to fulfill our scheme and build a championship roster? So we're looking at 4-3 base, and again, a lot of the time we're more than likely going to be running 5-2 nickel, which just means, of course, we substitute a linebacker to move either down on the line or into the secondary. We can do both, but we're more than likely going to be running nickel a lot. But we want to build it out of a 4-3 base, just because having 4 guys that can build the foundations of our defensive line is important in my mind. Certain positions we can kind of skimp on, basically. So defensively, let's talk positional priority. So number one, we want good edge rushers. So we're just going to say edge. I don't know why I did it that way, but edge is our number one priority. We want good edge rushers. You can never have too many pass rushers in the NFL. So what do we want out of a good rusher? What makes a good rusher? Well, I want someone who's, let's say, between 6'4" and 6'4" would be a good base. We want long arms. We want very long arms. This helps get past the offensive tackles. We want to prioritize strength. We want to prioritize burst off edge. And I think that's it, for me at least, to get good edge rushers. So number one priority defensively, we want edge rushers. Number two is where we can get a bit more creative. Certain teams are going to value different things. Most teams in the NFL, I would argue, are probably going to prioritize having good pass rushers, because the truth of the matter is the foundation of your defense is whether or not you can get to the opposing quarterback. Because good edge rushers are going to make your secondary better. They're going to make your linebackers better. And in that same line of thinking, I would probably put corner as my number two. Some people nowadays might be putting defensive interior at number two. But I'm going to put corner at number two because having a good secondary can also in turn help your pass rush. So when I am looking for good corners, I want guys that are good on press coverage, for sure. I want guys who can play man-to-man. I want at least one guy who can identify the defense and sort of read the play. This will be more our nickel guy, the guy that's more cerebral and doesn't have to do as much of the physical work. That's going to be this guy here who can identify what the team on offense is doing with their play calls and can communicate with the rest of the team. I also want guys with good long speed to match up with receivers. So I'm thinking somewhere in the 4.2 to 4.4 range, even though the combine isn't necessarily the best for actually identifying who is and isn't good at playing fast, because there's a difference between combine speed and game speed, and you see that sometimes where a 4.2 guy like John Ross just can't get it done in the NFL because, you know, the combine you train for, you can sort of inflate your numbers that way. But we want guys that are good in press, good in man. I want one guy that's good at reading the play, understanding what the NFL, what the opposing offense is setting up. I want good long speed, absolutely, to match up with opposing wide receivers. They can be about 5'10", maybe 5'9", to about 6'2", is what I personally would look like in terms of physical traits. Again, long arms Having a big wingspan is a huge, huge advantage in the NFL. So long arms, 5'10", 6'2", 4'2" to 4'4" speed. These are the kind of players I want from my corners. And then if we're looking at, I should have made this a bit smaller, but if we're looking at, D tackles, I'm looking at a guy who's 6'4" or taller. Usually you can get some smaller guys that are just really good mechanically, but 6'4" plus. Strength is a huge one. Again, long arms, can set the edge if needed. Pass rush upside as well. So these are the kind of players that I would be looking for. Personally, defensively, we can talk safeties. I don't really care about my safeties. I think they'd be at the bottom of my priority list. What I do want, absolutely, from my team specifically, if this is my team, I want a good Mike. Okay, so middle linebacker. As we talked about in that other video, the middle linebacker is the Mike linebacker. I want a good middle linebacker for sure. I would probably put them either third or fourth priority, maybe fourth after a good DT, just because of how the NFL operates these days. A good defensive tackle is going to get more and more expensive every year. But I also want a good Mike linebacker. I want this guy to be super smart, so good IQ, good coverage skills. Don't really need him in the pass rush category, so IQ, coverage. I don't really need him to be super fast. Tackling is a huge thing I want from my Mike linebacker. And then my other two linebackers, don't really care. My safeties, I don't really care. Let's move now to the offensive side of the ball. What do I want specifically as a GM if I'm building a team? Well, obviously, quarterback is our number one priority, and quarterback is where things can get really, really complicated with what traits people are looking for. There's always going to be debates about, do you want the hybrid, mobile, Lamar Jackson, Michael Vick types that can kill you with their legs as well as the arm? Do you want a more cerebral pocket guy like Drew Brees or Tom Brady? Personally, I want the guy that can read the field quickly. So I highly prioritize quick reads, IQ, long ball, accuracy, I like a little bit of rushing upside, but not a huge priority there. But the quick reads IQ, 100%. I want a guy who is steady in the pocket, so pocket presence is a must. Absolutely need a guy who understands what's happening in the pocket, can see the pocket collapsing, and good decision making skills is always a plus. So that is the kind of quarterback that I go for. That's the kind of quarterback that I really like, which is why I am so high on the 2024 quarterback class. If you watch some of my older videos, my older mock drafts and stuff, I am a huge believer in guys like Drake May, JJ McCarthy, Caleb Williams. Of course, I do seem to be a bit wrong about Jaden Daniels. I didn't think he was going to be horrible bad. I just didn't think he was going to elevate to the NFL, and I was proven completely wrong in that regard. But these are the kind of quarterbacks that I like. Obviously, if you run into a Lamar Jackson that has just freak athleticism, can do a lot of stuff that nobody else does, and you have a good coach, take him immediately and don't look back. But how often are you finding Lamar Jacksons? You know, um, a lot of front offices seem to just go for the guy with a cannon and hope they can make it work. Um, I don't really prioritize arm strength too much. You know, I want the more cerebral, I want the accurate. Honestly, this sort of perfectly describes Bo Nix, even though I was not a huge believer in Bo Nix, and I'm still not. Just because I don't think he's that fast with his reads. I think he's kind of a one read kind of guy, but this does describe Bo Nix to a degree, which is ironic that I don't like him too much, but this is the prototype that I'm looking for in a quarterback. When we talk about wide receiver, which I believe is the second most important position offensively, some people might say tackle, but I say wide receiver. There are two types of wide receivers that I really like. The first one is the Nico Collins, Julio Jones, big bodied jump ball, just, you know, go up and grab it kind of guys. So we're looking at a guy that's 6'3" or more. Again, good speed is important, but I also want route running. So route running is a big one. Good hands, obviously. We want a guy with good hands. Jump ball ability. This will be sort of our X receiver, just the guy that's out there that we know will make plays for us. Big playability, separation. This is my kind of guy. And then the second one is the more Justin Jefferson type, which is about 5'10" to 6 foot. Doesn't have the same jump ball ability, but is almost exclusively the route running type. So this is our more Z receiver. This is our other side receiver that just is a pure route technician. Beats guys with his footwork. So route technician, footwork. This is also the guy that we need to have our highest football IQ from the receiver position. This is the guy that we're going to be putting in motion, right? So this is our motion guy. We're going to scheme him open more often than not. The other guy, our big-bodied receiver, we're just going to run him down and hope he makes plays if our quarterback is throwing his way. But this guy, this second guy, the Justin Jefferson type, T. Higgins sort of, you know, these guys, these are the guys that we are going to build our scheme to just say, we're going to give you every opportunity to go out there and do what you do and get open and get huge yards. This is also the guy that we want with yards after catch ability. Of course, having some good yak in both wide receiver spots is a good thing to have, but specifically this guy, this sort of smaller guy, the route technician, this is the guy that I want to catch the ball and turn upfield immediately. But these are the two wide receivers I like the most. There are, you know, you guys who will prefer the speed types. That's not me. And then if we're looking at something like running back, I want a guy who can go for yards after contact. So I want a guy who can break tackles. He doesn't have to be super elusive. More so a power guy, right? Strength guy. That's what I'm looking for from the running back position. When I'm looking at offensive tackles, long arms, of course, is a big plus. So if you are an offensive tackle prospect and you're coming into the league and you don't have the arm size, the arm length, you're probably moving to the interior, to the guard position. That's just how it works in the NFL. Long arms absolutely is just a huge priority for offensive tackles. I also want a guy that has point of attack strength. So point of attack, which just means when you are running and you clash into the defensive end or the edge rusher or whoever you're matched up against to go and block, you have the strength to not immediately be bullied out of your stance and give up pressure on the quarterback. So I want a guy who can stand his ground, hold, especially on the left tackle or the blind side for the quarterback. I need that guy to be, strong as an ox. That is a huge up for me. So a guy like Penei Sewell, Christian Darrisaw, Trent Williams, just these big-bodied, you can't bully me out of my spot guys. Those are the guys I want for my offensive tackles. And then things like guards. Guards are important for what we're trying to do with the power zone. So we want a guy that's like, agile. Agile is huge there. We want him to have good footwork. But we don't really need to prioritize guard as much. We're not going to worry too much about who our center is. We just need a guy to snap the ball and not get completely bullied. He's more so there to support the other guys around him. We don't need him to be on one-on-one duties all the time. Of course, Jason Kelce, probably one of the best centers of the last 20 years. He could go one-on-one with a lot of people, but we're not really looking for that. For tight ends, if I'm looking for a tight end, I mainly want a guy that's pure possession. This is just the guy that's out there just to catch the ball if he has to, because we want our receivers doing most of the work. Our running back, if he has some catching upside as well, that would be nice. But our tight end, almost exclusively a possession guy. We can also get a second one that's just exclusively a blocking guy. We're not gonna go out and prioritize getting a unicorn like Travis Kelce, who's good at both, or Rob Gronkowski, who was incredible at both. But our tight end is sort of on the lower end of our priority list offensively. So I kind of like how this is built. QB is number one priority, wide receiver number two, offensive tackle should be above running back. So offensive tackle is definitely number three. And then I would personally probably put running back at number four. I know there's a lot of talk in the NFL these days just about the undervaluation of running backs. I don't believe it, especially because everybody's running a 5-2 nickel sort of thing. They're running two high safeties. They're running nickel corners. They're putting an extra guy in the secondary to stop the receivers. But they're putting a lot of light boxes out there. And if your team doesn't have a big nose tackle, like a lot of teams don't, that just opens up our guys to run the zone run, which is obviously what we're building. We're building a zone run scheme that just plays a lot of play action. So that's why we want to run a power zone scheme, because if we're running play action and we can run the ball with a guy who's absolutely deadly out there, they have to respect it. So I love the power zone run for that reason. But yeah, I like the way this looks. I like the team philosophy that we've got here. Of course, your team philosophy can be very different, but remember to just stay within the regulations of the game. And I thank you very much for watching. I hope this was a decent explanation of the many multitudes of ways that you can operate a team in the NFL. And I hope my handwriting doesn't horribly distract you because it's not ideal. But we are approaching 500 subscribers, which is incredible. That opens up first tier monetization on YouTube. So I do want to thank you all for your continued support. As always, I am currently working now on benefits packages for members once that is set up and ready, and I'll let you know more about that when that time comes. But as always, thank you for watching. I will speak with you all again soon, and goodbye for now.